Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 16th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Winfrey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And then at this time, we will all take part in reading our purpose statement.
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
And the first item on our agenda tonight is our celebrations and recognitions. And we are tonight have the honor of celebrating several ACSD retirees. So I'll invite the board to come on up to the front with me. All right. Yes, we have to get to the back of the line. So I will read out your name and you can come up and get your plaque and shake everyone's hands. So our first retiree is Stephen Woolry. He's retiring after 14 years in the Ames Community School District as a language arts teacher at Ames High School. Prior to his time in Ames, he taught for 10 years in other districts in Iowa for a total of 24 years of teaching. Can you guys over a little so that people who are watching can see us? There we go. Okay. Sunday Ogunzola is retiring after 16 years in the Ames Community School District as a social studies teacher at Ames High School. Amy, Erica, stay back here. Sorry. So we stay on the camera. Sorry. You're going to have to come all the way around to us. Thank you, Elisa. That's helpful. Mr. Ogunzola spent his entire teaching career at Ames High School. Monica Benning, I'm not sure if she was able to join us tonight. Monica is retiring after 21 years in the Ames Community School District as the school nurse at Ames High School. Prior to her time in Ames, she also had 19 years of previous nursing experience. Anna Weber is also not able to join us tonight. And there's other ones in the back, so you can keep that one. She is retiring after 22 years in the Ames Community School District as the school nurse at Sawyer Elementary. Prior to her time in Ames, she also had 28 years of previous nursing experience. Ronald Shuck is retiring after 23 years in the Ames Community School District as a science teacher at Ames High School. Prior to his time in Ames, he taught 13 years in the state of New York for a total of 36 years of teaching. Charlie Hanway is retiring after 23 years in the Ames Community School District as a third grade teacher at Edwards. Prior to her time in Ames, she taught 16 years in Vermont, Arizona, and Europe for a total of 39 years of teaching. Don Williams is not able to join us tonight. He's retiring after 24 years in the Ames Community School District as a special education teacher at Ames High School. Prior to his time in Ames, he taught for 7 years at another Iowa district for a total of 31 years of teaching. Kathy Packer was also not able to join us tonight. She's retiring after 25 years in the Ames Community School District, most recently as the secretary to the principal at Ames High School. She started with Ames Community School District as an educational assistant and has been in her current role for 16 years. Melinda Lowry was also not able to join us. She is retiring after 25 years in the Ames Community School District, most recently as the attendance secretary at Sawyer Elementary. She started with ACSD as a substitute, then became a media tech and has been in her current role for 3 years. Karen Klotzbach is retiring after 26 years in the Ames Community School District, most recently as the instructional coach at Meeker Elementary. Prior to her time at Ames, she taught for 4 years in Iowa and Minnesota for a total of 30 years of teaching. Steve McCrae is retiring after 27 years in the Ames Community School District as a math teacher at Ames Middle School. Prior to his time in Ames, he taught 1 year at another district in Iowa for a total of 28 years of teaching. Chris Ewan is retiring after 27 years in the Ames Community School District as a band director at Ames High School. Prior to his time in Ames, he taught for 6 years in another Iowa district for a total of 33 years of teaching. Stephen Hosh was not able to join us tonight. He's retiring after 30 years in the Ames Community School District as a special education teacher at Ames High School. Mr. Hosh spent his entire teaching career at Ames High School. Kathleen Johnson was also unable to join us. She's retiring after 32 years in the Ames Community School District, most recently as the secretary at the facilities building. She started with ACSD as a custodian and maintenance staff and has been in her current role for 8 years. Lise McKillop was also unable to join us tonight, is retiring after 32 years in the Ames Community School District as a PE teacher at Fellows Elementary. Mrs. McKillop spent her entire teaching career at Meeker and Fellows Elementaries. Mary Kay Palashek is retiring after 35 years in the Ames Community School District as the orchestra director at Ames High School. Prior to her time in Ames, she taught for 5 years in Montana and Wisconsin for a total of 40 years of teaching. And how about one last round of applause for all of our retirees? Thank you for your service. All right. And our next celebration and recognition for tonight is the recipients of the Seal of Biliteracy. And we'll turn it over to Shaylee Santiago.
Thank you. I have 2 teachers from Ames High who are joining me tonight. Spanish teachers Julie Duncan and Monica Martinez. And I'll ask the students who are here to be recognized to come up, and while they're making their way to the front, I'll say just a few words. So tonight I have the pleasure of introducing several of the 23 seniors who are earning the Seal of Biliteracy. These students demonstrated proficiency in English and at least 1 other language in all 4 language domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And I'm going to pass the mic and have them tell you your names, and if they want to include which language they're earning the seal, that'd be awesome.
I'm Madison DeLashmit, and I earned the seal in Spanish.
I'm Eva Anderson, and I also earned the seal in Spanish.
I'm Sofia Cordoba, and I earned the seal in Spanish and French.
I'm Pedro Loureiro, and I earned the seal in Portuguese.
My name's Zee, and I learned a seal in Chinese.
I'm Basmala, and I earned a seal in Arabic.
All right, and we want to take a moment just to celebrate these students and their achievements. So thank you.
Thank you to our students and language instructors for joining us tonight, and great job, all of you. Okay, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the public hearing for the 2021-22 proposed budget amendment. And just to make sure that folks are clear, this is a proposed budget amendment on the current school year's budget. And I think JD usually gets the papers for me. So I'm not sure. Amy, if there's any other ones, can you bring them up for me? Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I will go ahead and open our public hearing. But seeing that we have no one signed up to speak, I will close our public hearing on the 2021-22 proposed. What's that? Zoom? Nope, there's nobody on Zoom either. On the 2021-22 proposed budget amendment. And we will move on to our discussion items, beginning with our board committee updates. And we'll start with the facilities committee.
We are getting much closer on the high school. The general report is that things are moving very well. There's still some concerns related to supply chain issues, things like that, but it looks like everything's going to come in where we need it. One area to note is that the substantial completion date for some of the areas, most of the areas will be likely met by June 1st, but the auditorium might take until July 15th. It's got some of the bigger delays, but it's still on schedule. So it'll be completed. The hydronic system, which there have been some issues with, is operating and going well. And then also we reviewed some things about the naming of facilities, which we've had some discussions here about. And then there was a beginning of some discussion about alternative learning sites, potentially for the future. And then one thing we had discussed was the idea of consolidating a number of kind of interrelated but numerous things related to the middle school into kind of one potential bigger unit of work, because now that that's kind of the oldest school, we're starting to accumulate a number of maintenance things and improvements. And as we're rolling off the high school and some of the other things, really seeing about it, the committee thought it might be a good idea to bring several things together. So we just think of it as this is a group of improvements for the middle school altogether. So I expect we'll hear some more things about that in the future.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for facilities committee? All right, we'll move on to mental health committee. And we met on May 6th. There had been a request from our committee to staff to see what are some available screening tools that we have for mental health screening. And so Director Thomas came back with some options for those. One is called FastBridge, which has a social, academic, and emotional behavior risk screener called SABRS. It's designed to be administered 3 times a year as a computer-based survey, and it's a tool that we already have access to through the FastBridge. The second one is the Student Thriving Index, which is part of the Character Lab through Infinite Campus. We don't currently have access to that one, but since we have access to Infinite Campus, it was one that we had the ability to get access to. The committee discussed and we decided that SABRS seemed like the best option. And so staff will take that back and consider what it would look like. Would they propose doing a pilot? Would they propose doing a pilot along with the schools that are going to be participating in the mental health pilot? Or would we do like a particular grade level? So there will be more to come on that. We decided as a committee to pause our work over the summer because of the comprehensive mental health pilot. So we'll wait until September when we have more concrete examples and information from that pilot to determine what next steps the committee wants to take. And then there was one request from the committee to bring to policy something kind of formalizing the process for outside providers who provide services in the schools. So something that would just be formalized at every building.
I have a question on the screener. How does that compare to the tool that is currently used? Because we have a mental health screener right now, right?
Yes, and Deanie, are you able
Deanie,
to answer that one real quick? I think it's more comprehensive. Is that?
Yeah, so the screener that we use once a year is more of a parent choice kind of specific mental health screener. Savers and the Thriving Character Lab are actually more genuine screeners for a school setting. So you would do them 3 times a year and then drill down when you get kids who come out as at risk from that.
So would that other one go away when you put in, or is there value in?
We would probably keep that one as a way if we saw some concerns on the 3 times a year screener, on the more educational screener, then that would be an option that counselors could offer to families to try to identify what specific issues might be there.
Okay.
Other questions or comments for Mental Health Committee? Policy Committee.
Policy Committee met on the 10th, yes, on May 10th, and we'll have the discussion of the policies in a minute, but I actually was not there, but I can tell you from the minute that we have quite a few new policies made based on IASB recommendation. I don't know if there's anything Elisa or Sabrina want to add.
There's something on that, but we can wait till we
Okay.
the policies. So
Sounds good. And then Equity Committee.
We don't have any meeting minutes in here, but we did meet. We had a presentation from Edwards Elementary and the teachers there in their equity group and work group there, and some of the things they've been doing. So kind of continuing along this pattern and just having staff talk to us about all the great work they're doing. And one of the discussions that came out of that with the district staff was just kind of how we can maybe talk a little bit this summer or whenever we're talking about the equity strategic plan of what is a strategy for kind of like weaving together some of the best practices that get found at various elementaries, to having some consistency, but still allowing each elementary to try new things. So yeah, it was a great presentation.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Equity Committee?
I'll just add that I was impressed with not just the work that they're doing, but that they're monitoring and showing progress and improvement in some areas. And I think that's just really important to highlight. So we've got some great work going on in the district.
Thank you. All right, and we did not have anyone sign up to speak about board committees. So we'll move on to our policies for discussion.
So like Kelly said, that many of these are new, and a majority of these follow the recommendations from the IASB review that they've provided. But I think a couple of things that I would add in general, we had a couple of policies, and one would be 405.6, that would be one example, that the IASB language, we actually had a pretty rich conversation about the language that they'd used, because on 405.6, it was about determined, it was something about the board will determine. And we really felt like it would better represent the work of the board to use, we changed their word to approve, and we inserted part where about the recommendation from the superintendent, because oftentimes what happens in our community is there's a belief, because we approve all contracts in the district, that we are actually interviewing and screening these individuals, of which we do none of this. We screen and interview for one position, and that's the superintendent. And so we had a really good discussion and clarified some language on multiple policies, because we wanted them to truly represent the work that we do in our districts for the public. So I think there were some really good improvements that we made. A couple of other ones, I know, like with 405.4, some of it, the continuing contracts, some of these things in the past have maybe been in staff handbook or master, some of the master contract changes that came about with Chapter 22 changes in 2017. So now there's just some a few new policies that have been added. So I think that these are really good working policies to clarify our work that we do as a board.
Any questions on the policies for discussion? All right, I will entertain a motion. No, I'm sorry, it's discussion. Never mind. We'll do that next. All right, we did not have any community members signed up to speak under the policies for discussion, so we'll move on to our teaching and learning update, which tonight will be a discussion of concurrent enrollment, contracted courses, and alternative measures of proficiency. And we'll turn it over to Dr. Hawkins.
Good evening. Thank you for an opportunity to talk with you. These are exciting opportunities for our students to be able to discuss. All right, if we could pull up the, sorry, I'm scrolling here. What would be the PowerPoint, if you will? I know it's a PDF, but perfect, thank you. All right, I want to walk through just a few things to make sure that we're all understanding concurrent enrollment courses and understanding essentially what's being asked of you tonight as a board in order to approve those courses. So concurrent enrollment is dictated by two different Iowa codes, and it provides, it's one of a series of things that provides our high school students the opportunity to earn college experience and college credit while earning high school credit at the same time. Again, the specific Iowa codes are referenced there in this slideshow. And specifically, Senior Year Plus, which is the guidance that our Department of Education puts out from these codes, provides opportunities for students to have advanced placement courses, either on-site or in a consortium online, college credit courses offered through written agreements, which is primarily what we'll be talking about tonight, college and university courses offered through the PSEO options, courses offered through regional or career academies, and internet-based college courses. Those are 5 broad areas that are covered through Senior Year Plus guidance in these 2 codes. Again, that second option, B, community college courses offered through written agreements, are called concurrent enrollment courses, and that's where we'll maintain our focus of the conversation tonight. So which students are eligible to take concurrent enrollment courses? Again, dictated by code, students who meet the enrollment requirements established by the post-secondary institution. Community colleges are able to set their entrance requirements for our students to take these courses, including any prerequisite courses that the community college may deem as necessary. The high school or the district does not get to set prerequisite courses, but the community college does. And then students need to meet a minimum proficiency on our Iowa assessments, or our Iowa the statewide assessment of student progress, our ISASPs. They have to be proficient in math, reading, and science, all 3 portions, in order to be eligible to take many of the courses, not all. I'm sorry, so courses not identified as career technical education courses are what our students need to be proficient on. So if it's a career technical education course as defined by the community college, you don't have to meet proficiency. Otherwise, you have to meet that academic proficiency. So what are your responsibilities as a board to approve? These codes state that annually the board will approve the list of courses that are recommended or that students can take to earn college credit. I will tell you that in future years, it would be my plan to simply have these courses listed in our handbooks, as well as some of the other requirements of Senior Year Plus. And if you remember in the fall, when I brought handbooks to you to approve, and I said that there were a multitude of reasons why it's good for annually the board to approve our handbooks, this would be one of those multitude of reasons. So we will just work this in as a process. But because I couldn't necessarily find evidence that we'd had this conversation recently, I wanted to set it aside to have a specific conversation tonight. So approving which courses will be contracted is a responsibility annually, including what kind of criteria, how will we determine which courses are going to be approved and contracted and which ones are not. And I'll tell you the process that was used this year to bring you a recommendation. And then this doesn't have to be done annually, but approving what alternative measures of proficiency. So if a student does not measure as proficient on math, reading, and science on those assessments that I referenced earlier, rather than having them not eligible to take concurrent enrollment courses that are, we are able to, if we choose to identify other measures that the student can show to be eligible to take those courses. And there is a recommendation coming to you tonight on that. So how did we go about determining these local criteria and recommendations? A committee of several folks, including high school staff, district office teaching and learning staff, homeschool assistance program staff, administrators, counselors, so on and so forth, met over several meetings to review state code in the senior year plus and to build our capacity around what does the law say, to have philosophical conversation about what are students doing now and how might we want to expand opportunities for students with this programming, and to come up with recommendations for which courses, what criteria, and what alternative measures of proficiency should we offer. You can see here that the criteria that we boiled down to through several conversations where we thought that we would recommend to you courses to be approved that were either courses associated with the career academies that are available to our students through DMAC, existing concurrent enrollment courses that are offered at our high school, courses that are aligned to PSEO courses that are frequently requested, which I'll talk about in just a minute, courses that extend our programming. And then if it didn't align there, we thought we may need to every once in a while approve a course that is not typically requested, but it might align with a student's four-year plan for their post-secondary plan. We talked a lot about marine biology, right? That would be a course that we might not normally see requested. It might normally be approved, but if somebody's four-year plan was to go into marine biology, there may be some courses that we would recommend that year to be approved to align to four-year plans that we wouldn't see in other years. Again, it is an annual approval process. So I want to talk for a few minutes about the PSEO that I just mentioned. I know particularly with having Iowa State in our backyard, we're probably very used to having students go to Iowa State University to take several courses. I want to read this to you. This is taken exactly from Senior Year Plus guidance that I've referenced a couple of times. That's the overarching document produced by our Department of Education that's founded upon the two codes that I addressed earlier. It reads, and this is from page 32 of that document, it reads, a school district may not enroll students in a PSEO course when it is possible for such enrollment to be handled through a contracted course offered through the concurrent enrollment program. If the district has a contractual agreement with an eligible post-secondary institution, enrollments through PSEO are not permissible. And there's the code reference right there. In practice, this means that the vast majority of high school student enrollment in community college coursework will be through the concurrent enrollment program. Only in rare circumstances, such as a district without any concurrent enrollment agreements, is enrollment in a community college course through PSEO permissible. So in other words, you're going to see in that list of recommended courses that some of the courses that our students might be used to traveling to Iowa State to take actually probably should be, I'm using couched language there, I'll be more direct, should be taken from DMAC as a concurrent enrollment course. I would want you as a board to know that I've reached out to our consultants at the Department of Ed 3 different times to ask questions like, well, what if transportation stood in the way? And hypothetically, what if ISU was 1 mile away and DMAC was 6 miles away? And they have consistently come back with, no, this is the law. If it's possible for students to take courses at our concurrent enrollment programming rather than PSEO programming, that is precisely what you should be doing. So I wanted to be very specific in addressing that point because I think it would be quite different, at least in some courses, than what we have seen in the past. I'll take questions here at the end. So after I'm done with a few things, I'll review with you the list of recommended courses. Again, the criteria that got us there has been shared already, but I can address it again if desired. And our alternative measures of proficiency, I can go through that. Would you prefer that I go through those lists or at least kind of briefly skim over those before I answer questions, or do you have questions for me now?
I don't know yet.
You don't know yet.
So keep
Okay, that's
going.
fair.
Keep talking. Keep
Why don't-
talking. We'll think of questions.
That's fine. Why don't we take a look at the list of contracted DMAC courses that are being suggested to you to approve. So you'll see a total of 143 courses that align to the criteria that we just talked about, that this committee is recommending the board approve for next year for our students to take as contracted concurrent enrollment courses. So again, annually as a board, you get the opportunity to approve this list, but this list represents the criteria that I talked about earlier. They are courses aligned to career academies. They're courses that align to what our students currently have access to. They're aligned to commonly requested PSEO courses when an option exists at DMAC that aligns to that PSEO course. There were some PSEO courses that didn't align and those weren't recommended. They were recommended to stay as PSEO courses. This also represents extensions of our programming. I don't know that there are any courses here recommended as extensions of a four-year plan at this time. So if approved, this would represent a pretty significant expansion of concurrent enrollment programming for our students. Once approved, whatever the list is, we'll then publish that to our community, put it in our course registration guide, make sure students understand the process for getting signed up for these courses, as well as how they'll earn college credit for these courses.
So I thought of a question,
Great.
just logistics, because I'm not in all this, right? When it says location for the DMAC courses and it's got those three options, what do those mean to our students and families as far as where they take it, how they transport, how a course works for them from a student's perspective?
That's a great question. I appreciate that because that lets us get into a couple iterations of how this works. So when we approve a course, I'm not part of the board, when you approve a course as the board, you're approving the course, not the modality of how it's taken. So if a course happens to be offered at Ames High School campus, then students can take it there. If it happens to be offered through an online venue, that's the OLCA, the Online Career Academy, students can take it online. If it happens to be offered at DMAC's campus, students can take it that way. In theory, if it happened to be offered at Boone's campus and the kid could work it into their schedule without having to sacrifice too many things, they could travel there. Travel for concurrent enrollment courses is the responsibility of the individual student and family. It's spelled out specifically in Senior Year Plus, but that's not an obligation of the district. If we wanted to have conversation as a board about how to fund that in order to make greater equity and access to those courses, we could have that conversation, but it is not something that the board would be obligated to do by code. So again, I appreciate the question because we got into quite a bit with that answer, but the direct answer to your question is those are different modalities of how that course is offered. But once a course is approved, the student actually has choice over how they take it. We can strongly encourage like, oh no, why don't you take that on our campus, or why don't you take that online to work better in your schedule? But ultimately the student has the option to take that in whatever modality they prefer.
They have the option on the modality, but it has to be DMAC, because these are offered through DMAC, not Iowa State.
That is correct.
correct?
Yeah, modality is different than institution. You're
Yeah,
right. So
okay.
all of the things that
I
we're
see,
bringing
yep.
you tonight are concurrent enrollment courses
Mhm.
to be approved. Concurrent enrollment is the way the state has defined the relationship between school districts and community colleges. So we will still have a number of students who take classes through Iowa State through what's called the PSEO or post-secondary enrollment options. Remember that first slide where I said there's 5 ways to do this? That PSEO option is one of those 5, but we're primarily talking tonight about way number 2, and that's those concurrent enrollment courses. So yeah, what you see here tonight is only concurrent enrollment recommendations for course approval, because part of the code says that annually we are supposed to approve those courses.
So if there's a course at Iowa State that is not approved among our list of concurrent enrollment courses, can a student then take that? I'm sorry, you've probably explained this and I just don't get it.
Well, to be frank, no, I didn't, because PSEO has its own set of criteria for course approval. and because this is a concurrent enrollment conversation, I didn't get too deep into that.
Okay.
But there are 7 different criteria. I don't have them all memorized. I apologize, but there's 7 different criteria that govern eligibility for PSEO courses. So when students sign up for PSEO courses through Iowa State, we have to use those, and it's federally established criteria in order to gauge whether or not that's a course we can approve. And that's done on an individual basis. There isn't a process like this one where we come and annually approve that list of courses. That's not set forth in code for PSEO courses because there's a federal guidance on it. I believe it's 7 criteria.
Okay, so just to give an example that's very close to home because I know it, say Introduction to Comparative Politics in the Department of Political Science at Iowa State. If somebody were to, I mean, there's no comparative politics course listed under concurrent enrollment here. So if a student is interested in taking comparative politics, then they could take Introduction to Comparative Politics at Iowa State.
Yes, they very much could. I'll give you, if you want to, I can give you an example of a course that I've used several times in these conversations with folks to help illustrate how it might be a little different, and that is Calculus 2. We don't offer Calculus 2 at our high school. The vast majority of our students who want to take Calculus 2 go to Iowa State University to take that course through PSEO. DMAC does offer Calculus 2, and again, I've checked multiple times with the state. The expectation would be, and you'd see here as approved for recommendation, students would be going to DMAC to take Calculus 2 and following with those codes and with Senior Year Plus rather than going to Iowa State to take Calculus 2. So that'd be a practical example of what that might feel like as a change for our community.
So if DMAC, to continue my example, if DMAC were to offer Intro to Comparative Politics, and I really have no idea if they do or not, but if they did, then it would need to go on to the concurrent enrollment
That
list.
is very accurately analyzed, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
If I might, there's a real difference in funding. So for concurrent enrollment, we get what's called supplemental weighting. So we turn that in through certified enrollment, and you'll see that when we'll talk about my budget book later. There's a thing called supplemental weighting Career Academy. And so we get weighting for each of these classes to help offset the costs. So the district gets weighting through the state formula. We pay DMAC for the courses. For PSEO, there is no supplemental weighting. There is no funding. And because of that, the max that a 4-year institution can charge the district is $250 a course.
So sorry, I'm slow on this because I haven't gone through this with a student. So the on-campus course options for the concurrent enrollment, that would be taught at our high school. But is that by a DMAC instructor or by an Ames High instructor or by an Ames High instructor accredited by DMAC?
Well, we have some flexible options when it comes to that. Currently, all of our concurrent enrollment programs that are offered at the high school campus are taught by our teachers. And so teachers have a process of applying to DMAC to be considered an adjunct professor for them, in which they review their transcripts and say, yep, you've met our requirements to teach this for college credit. And then they can teach on our campus, and students can receive that same college credit without ever having to leave campus. I have in a previous district been in a situation where we wanted to offer a course but nobody on our campus held the certification. So we asked DMAC if they would send a professor to us. They did. Our students were able to still stay on our campus, take that course, and get college credit without having to leave campus. That was a rare example, late resignation, difficult finding somebody with those exact certifications, that type of thing. Typically, if there's not someone on our high school campus that has the qualifications to teach it, and there is an on-campus option that students want to take, they could then travel to DMAC to take it there.
So in general terms, for a lot of students, the way they would experience this is just going to another classroom in the high school and taking a course, and they'll get community college credit for it.
Yep.
What percentage of courses, just general guess, would you say is that way versus going onto DMAC campus or online? Doesn't have to be specific.
Well, I count 16 currently of the 143 that we're suggesting you approve. Okay. So as we districts have options. We can look as we hire new staff, we can look to hire with the preference of someone who has concurrent enrollment certification. We could work with our current staff. Many of our current staff, I'm sure, are either could already do it if they applied and had their transcripts reviewed, or maybe would be a course or two away from that. But as we think about expanding those opportunities, I think we will find other ways and other implications or ripples, if you will, from that expanded program.
So it's 16 out of 143, but presumably there are a lot, I mean, in terms of student credit hours or.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more student, I mean.
There are a lot more student hours.
So for
in
example,
those classes.
some of those courses are labeled here as Intro to Lit and Composition 1 and Composition 2. What that is our AP Language and our AP Lit courses. So students are signing up for an AP course. They're going to class like they would because their teacher happens to be also qualified to be a DMAC professor. They're getting college credit and high school credit at the same time.
So a large percentage of our student credit hours is in those classes that are offered.
Yeah,
on the
I don't.
AHS campus.
Yeah, I would want to do more analysis to know what percentage it is, but I would agree with you that we funnel way more kids through our on-campus courses than off-campus. Yes.
I was going to ask, what are the criteria applied to whether it is reasonable for a student to be able to make it to an off-campus course? So let's say you brought up that there was a course in Boone. Mm-hmm. Let's say the student doesn't have a car. Who decides whether that's reasonable for them to be able to make it there by bus or getting a ride from somebody else, or whether it's easier to just go to ISU?
Sure. Well, I'll answer if it's okay from my experience as a previous high school principal. So the student who wants to travel further off campus than normal, we would sit down with the family. We'd think about, okay, so how much time would you have to be away from school in order to access this course? Can we still get you access to this course without sacrifice? To say, yeah, we're gonna do this, but it means you can't take government is usually not a good option for our students, right? So we have to see how does that fit into the grander plan of earning a diploma. And then, yes, if it's feasible to think that with travel time and course taking and travel time back, we can still get you these courses and not sacrifice your diploma, then we go into problem solving mode on transportation strategies.
So it's usually a consultation with student parents and other people that would have it.
Different students, the concurrent enrollment options are open to students in grades 9 through 12. And so different students are at different stages of problem solving at various stages of the process. Sometimes a student really wants to take advantage of a career academy and it would be perfect for them, but unfortunately they maybe had previous failure in their academic career and they need to stay on campus in order to make sure that they get the diploma. That's why one of the things that I think is really important is that we make sure that our students are aware of these opportunities right away. So they're planning for if I wanted to do a career academy, how do I have time in my senior year to be off campus for a half day to access this program?
Good, thank you.
Just to piggyback off of, because there was something on the tail end of Brett's question that I want to make sure was clear. It wouldn't be the case that a student wasn't able to travel to Boone for the class, so then they would be allowed to go to Iowa State instead. They would still not be allowed to go to Iowa State, correct?
Not according to I don't know why, but I don't want to use her name, but according to the DE consultant that oversees this work, I asked that specific question and no, they would not be able to go to Iowa State for that course. Yeah, so that's where we could consider what options we want to provide as a district. Again, in code, it is very clear that it is not an obligation of the district or the board to provide transportation for these courses. But that might be where we want to see if we can expand some online opportunities for courses.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would that mean to expand online opportunities for those courses?
Well, if we get staff that are certified to teach and want to offer an online version, or that might be our advocacy. So as a former high school principal, sometimes I would advocate, hey, I've got lots of requests for this. Is there any way that you can create an online version of this course? And DMAC's doing a lot of that.
From the list of courses here, so there's the Career Academy, Online Career Academy, and then on-campus courses. does this not include just online DMAC classes? Or does that make sense?
Well, yes, if there, so I don't know whether all of the, I apologize for not knowing this, but let's look at, so for example, general biology 2. It's on the last page, it's the top line, it's listed as an on-campus option at DMAC.
Mhm.
I am not aware right now whether there's an online version of that course. If there is, through, let's just assume the board approves this list. If they did, and if there was an online version of that course, they're approved to take the online version. Because again, I'm asking you to approve courses, not right now.
Right. Yeah, I was curious because since you mentioned the online option, I imagine some of these would also be offered online.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I can't speak more intelligently right now about which of these are also on.
We don't expect you to memorize
No.
the DMAC course catalog
I
and
appreciate
schedules.
I appreciate that. Would it be okay with the board if we transition to look at the alternative measures of proficiency?
Let's do
Great. So again, the first part of this document is really a process document that walks through how might we go about this work. But the overarching gist of this document is that for those courses that are listed as academic, that general biology one that we were looking at is a really good example. In order to take general biology, our students must be proficient on math, science, and reading. So even though you say, well, wait a minute, it's a science course. Why do I need to be proficient on reading? Well, that's because that's the way the state code in Iowa works. You have to be proficient on all three. So let's stick with this example that I wanted to take general biology, but I wasn't proficient in reading, but I was on math and science. My counselor at the high school could work with me to determine for English, did I get a C or better on my most recent course in that subject area? If I didn't, did I get an 18 or better on my ACT in that area? If that's not the case, did I get a 480 or better on my SAT? Or did I get a 220 or better on my math test? So in other words, we've identified multiple pathways of data pieces to look at to determine, again, there's lots of research that would suggest that the more opportunity our students have to engage in college coursework prior to going to college, the more successful they're going to be when they get to college. So finding ways to provide access to kids to these courses is really good for their academic progress, which is why we would be, this is not required. I want to make sure that's clear. Boards do not have to approve alternative measures of proficiency. Our district is recommending that we do, and that it is varied to try to get as much access to this programming as we can.
How did you come to the C makes sense in terms of the other scores? Why those numbers?
So the scores that you see for the ACT represent ACT's literature on the benchmark that if students get that score, they're most likely to be successful in their first year course at college.
Okay.
The MAP equivalent is the score that would align best to the former 40th percentile of proficiency, which is where ISAS would be marking proficiency. I apologize, I can't speak as intelligently about the SAT score, although I think it would be logical to believe that it would correlate to the ACT, and that 3 or better on the AP test is what's generally used by most colleges as the mark upon which you can get college credit.
Great, thank you.
Can you explain on the second bullet at the top, the additional late AHS courses part? About the AP courses? Where it says they don't have these requirements?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So I mentioned that really briefly. So the same code that governs all of the things that we're talking about tonight indicates that if you're signed up for what is labeled as a CTE course, a career and technical education course by the post-secondary institution, you do not have to meet the proficiency measures. So if I want to go take welding for college credit, I do not have to show proficiency. If I want to go take math for college credit, I do.
I meant the next sentence.
Oh, sorry.
AHS courses that are designated as AP courses.
That do not carry concurrent
That do not
enrollment weighting.
Oh,
what's an example of that?
Okay.
AP Psych.
Thank you. I needed some help. All right. So if students take AP psychology, the way that they're going to get college credit is through the AP test at the end. We do have some courses in which the person, so concurrent enrollment really comes down to the person teaching the course, not the course itself. So when we have examples where the person teaching the course meets DMAC's qualifications to be an adjunct professor, they can take AP Lang and Lit and have it as an AP class using the AP curriculum. But because that teacher qualifies to teach it for DMAC credit, they can earn concurrent enrollment credit at the exact same time they're taking the class. So they get high school credit, they can get DMAC credit. And if they were like, no, I'm going to a college that won't accept this from DMAC, they can take the AP test and transfer in the AP credit. If the professor or if the teacher teaching an AP course, AP psychology, does not have that approval from DMAC to teach as an adjunct professor, then they take it for AP credit and there is no concurrent enrollment credit associated with it.
Do we systematically work with our high school teachers to, who are teaching AP classes to get them listed as licensed adjunct instructors at DMAC or not?
I don't know that I haven't run across evidence that has previously been a big push.
Okay. But we have several teachers who are teaching concurrently at DMAC.
We are, and I was told anecdotally by one of the high school administrators that several of the teachers are now saying and asking questions, oh, I think I'm only a course or two away. So I think there's potentially a growing, I wouldn't want to mislead the board. There has not been a conscientious push by the district to say to teachers, we really want you to do this. I would say this approval process at least has been the most discussion we've had over this concept since I've been in the district in 3 years. And asking you to approve 143 courses does definitely, in my experience here, represent a big expansion of this programming. So I think it's reasonable to think that that expansion in this conversation may elicit some of the things you're asking about, but there hasn't been a big push in the past.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't want to encourage that among the teachers, because it will benefit the students so much in the end?
It benefits the students greatly. If I'm being fully transparent, I think there's a little anxiety on teachers' part to think, well, if students leave our campus and are taking classes from other people and they're not taking classes from me and I don't have high registrations, what does that mean for my job and my role? I would remind our board, as Chris said, we're not only getting the funding for the student, we're getting supplemental funding for the student going out and participating in the opportunity. So we're not missing out on significant amounts of money for students participating in this. But I want to be as genuine as I can in answering your question. And there is a little bit of anxiety about what that might mean for lost enrollment.
So I think a follow-up to that, maybe assuming we go forward with this, I would like to see some consideration put into maybe to come to the board in the future with what could we do to help support staff or promote staff to be able to get these things so that they can feel more comfortable, but also teach the dual enrollment courses.
Sure, I'd be happy to look into that.
Director Beerbaum, that's a great lead in to that next discussion item too, about what are some indicators that the board might care about that show that we are reaching towards that optimization of student opportunity. And that may actually be an indicator that you would, for example, want to think about attached to one of the goals going forward. So in systems that have that kind of goal to know where are we now and what are we trying to reach for, you typically can see some shift in that pretty significantly. It's a great financial benefit for our families as well. When you think about being able to be in high school and finish high school, semester of college worth of credit, a whole year worth of credit, there are many, many benefits.
Yeah, I can tell you again, I've spoken a little bit tonight with, my former role as a high school principal, the number of families that had said, oh, Susie's starting as a sophomore at so-and-so school, or I could tell you personally, my child will not need to go to 4 years of undergraduate work because of the prevalence of these options. So there is definitely financial benefit for our community as a result. Again, I chose to pretty intentionally focus tonight on every piece of research that I'm familiar with would suggest that if we can get kids exposed to college courses, they're going to be more successful when they get there. Our most recent Insight data suggests that anywhere between 70 and upper 80% of our students are enrolling and then going back to college. So just getting our kids prepared for the future that their data is already showing they're going to us, to me, is the call for why we expand this programming and make it available to more kids.
So I have a simple question about reading this table, the table called Contracted DMAC Spring 2022. Do we somewhere see on there which proficiency measures students are supposed to have? So on the far right column says AHS credit type.
Yeah.
And is that where we see which proficiency measures they're supposed to meet?
For any and all courses that are academic courses, and I can, if the board would prefer, I can get a new list to you that shows which are considered academic and which are CTE. But for any course that is an academic course, the first screen, if you will, are the ISAS scores. And then when that doesn't work for students, then we go to that alternate measure of proficiency. So it's the same process for any academic course.
Okay. Did I ask how many so we have this list and you said it's expanding. How many do we currently have approved?
Yeah, I apologize. I clearly on here you can read which ones are on campus, but we do have students going off campus for career academies now and online courses. So if you're okay with it, that might be something I could look up and get to you following the meeting.
Oh, no, I was just kind of curious because
Okay.
expanding is still beneficial. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I should have anticipated the question. I apologize. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the
Thank you,
conversation.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yep.
All right. Oh, and we do have 3 community members signed up to speak. Dr. Vincent is part of the discussion items here. So I won't read our public forum statement right now, but if you could just state your name and address or your name and school, and then you will have 3 minutes to speak, and there'll be a timer up, and you can come right on up to this microphone here. Andres Cordova. No, it's this one. Yeah.
Tell me what are the things I should say to introduce myself?
Yes, your name and school.
Okay.
It should be, oh, thank you. Yep.
Hi, I'm Andres Cordova. I am a former student of Ames High School, and I'm currently attending Duke University, and I would just like to take the floor for a moment. Dr. Hawkins would have you believe that concurrent enrollment is always option 1, when it is not always option 1, but is often option 2. I disagree with no less than 16 courses on this list right here. Most of them already just in STEM. I think there are more courses available on this list that I would disagree with if I had more knowledge about them. To start with, I would actually like to go with options 70 and 71 on the spreadsheet, which are principles of microeconomics and macroeconomics. These I disagree with for different reasons. I want to clarify to the school board that these are courses available through the IOPA program, available through the University of Iowa. These are online courses that I can profess profoundly to being the most helpful to students and great for AP exams and for college credit. To go into the rest of them, these are primarily courses that at the moment are PSEO and taught at Iowa State University. I will have my colleagues speak a little bit more about the benefits of these courses, why they're higher quality, and the benefits they currently offer that we will be losing out on if we choose concurrent enrollment as our only option for near everything, which is what this expanded list would say. As we've been talking about, this has been proposed as an expansion to the program. I would rather have you say that this is actually a regression and reduction to this program, because you are reducing options to PSEO availability, and you are regressing the quality of the education, the quality of the opportunities that we will be getting through both documentation and, as my colleagues will also have you know, the quality that they personally experience in these courses. Travel several times has been brushed under the rug. This is a major problem. Right now, most of our students can go with a PSEO course, take the Ride that is outside the school, take it for 20 minutes and arrive on central campus of Iowa State University and walk to whatever class they want. This is not an option that is available when you go to DMAC. What we have to consider is that this isn't something that is often consulted. I, nor any of the students that I currently know of, nor any of the students that have ever attended Ames High that I speak to, have actually been consulted about how we're actually going to be traveling to Iowa State. There's never been consulting about equity, about how to get there. It's always been on our shoulder. When it goes to DMAC, this becomes an even greater problem and will actually reduce the capability of most students to even get to DMAC if they choose to do so. From here, I'd like to just point out that PSEO obviously has budgetary constraints. PSEO is funded more by the school, as far as I'm aware, and does not receive Iowa funding directly to help out. I understand that this would obviously be a financial concern for the school board, but I must say that your primary mission should be education, and the education that you can receive right here in town, not a mile from here, is far superior to what we could get over at DMAC, way further away. For now, I will concede the rest of my time to my colleagues who will speak to you a little bit more about the quality of education they receive at Iowa State University and why we need to keep this compared to DMAC.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jerry Hahn, and we'll reset our timer to 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Jerry Hahn, and I'm a current senior at Ames High School, and I'll be attending Northwestern University in the fall. So from my understanding is that senior year plus, as well as these Iowa codes, state that concurrent enrollment options would, if expanded, be limiting these PSEO options as they would be the first method that is allowed to us students. But as a board, from my understanding, you have the ability to keep those options open if those concurrent enrollment options are not approved. So accessibility to college credit is arguably the biggest thing that Dr. Hawkins has been talking about, and the biggest issue of the board as wanting to further students' education. And the fact is that credit from a two-year institution such as DMAC or any other community college is simply not accepted and viewed equally as credit from a four-year institution as Iowa State. I'll use Dr. Hawkins used Calculus 2 as an example. I'll use the example of Calculus 3, which is a course I personally took at Iowa State last semester in the fall. And had I taken Calculus 3 through DMAC, the credit wouldn't be accepted at the institution that I'll be attending later this fall. However, since I took it at Iowa State through PSEO, I'll get that credit and I'll be acknowledged for the work that I had to do. I also acknowledge the existence and opportunity of taking AP tests, such as Dr. Hawkins had said, but the fact is that there's a spreadsheet of 143 courses that are on this DMAC list, and for the vast majority of them, there is no AP exam equivalent, such as Calculus 3. Those courses would be extremely difficult to get recognized at many a four-year institution, and therefore, I just think it's unfair for students to be doing college-level work and not getting the credits that they have earned. Further, the resources that are allocated to PSEO students through Iowa State are simply much greater than those that you would find at DMAC. I myself have taken many a dual enrollment course, such as AP Language and English Language and Composition, and it's treated almost the exact same way as a normal Ames High course would be. But at Iowa State, PSEO students are afforded almost the exact same resources as a full-time IOSU student. You have access to makerspaces, labs, student jobs and research opportunities, as on top of access to the ISU library and all the technology and opportunity that can bring as well. Further, Iowa State classes offer something that is very difficult to replicate at DMAC, and that is the existence of TAs, that graduate teaching assistants that can be extremely helpful for students, especially when it's their first time going into a college level course load. Finally, I would just like to say that I don't have a problem with concurrent enrollment in the space that it's given at Ames High right now. And for a lot of people, I think that having these Ames High teachers be acknowledged for their ability to teach a DMAC course and getting that credit provides a pleasant surprise when they go to apply for colleges. However, if approving more of these concurrent enrollment courses limits the PSEO system, I would say that it is not worth it and it causes more harm than good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Emily Pope.
Hello, my name is Emily Pogue, and I'm a current senior at Ames High. And I know that we are talking today about PSEO, post-secondary enrollment options. And as someone with personal experience with this program, I would just like to say a couple words about that. So first of all, as a bit of a background, I have taken many courses at ISU, including but not limited to science lab courses, math courses, and summer courses. So I have a pretty broad experience with this sort of thing. And I'd like to say that the trying to compare like DMAC to an institution like ISU is basically like comparing apples to oranges. You can't really compare them because the things that you're given at ISU are so much greater than what would be afforded to you at a two-year institution like DMAC. So for example, as Jerry said, he briefly mentioned the graduate TA system. As a person with science lab experience, graduate TAs are integral to my experience. They are so helpful. You email them with any question that you have, they will respond to you pretty much within 2 hours. That is such a valuable resource to have as a student who really kind of was trying out this whole PSEO thing on their own. Like I am the first child of my family, and so I was pretty much the guinea pig. I was trying to figure all of this out. My parents were trying to figure it out with me. It was so helpful to have the graduate TAs. And as well as that, I'd like to also say that I have experience with the Parks Library system. So they have this lending system. It's called the Tech Lending System. And through them, I was able to borrow a computer when I needed it to work on things such as, you know, lab reports and PowerPoint slide presentations at my home, because the school computers that we had, it's very difficult to get Microsoft Word and Office 365 on them just because of the sort of admin restrictions and everything. So it's a much easier segue to just go through tech lending. And that is something that wouldn't have really been afforded to me if I had gone to DMAC, just because of the time to get to DMAC campus to get such a computer, if even tech lending exists in any capacity at DMAC. So resources, huge at Iowa State. And I'd also like to say that for Iowa State and DMAC in particular, transcripts are another huge thing that I think that you should probably maybe consider a little bit more, just because as a student who applied to some, you know, pretty competitive colleges, pretty competitive institutions, the Iowa State transcript has a much heavier weight in the admissions process than a DMAC one would, simply because of the nature of the institution and because of transfer policies, as Jerry said. So these transfer policies, they're very strict when you're trying to transfer from one state to another, and especially from a community college in one state to a four-year institution in one state. And often they'll give no credit at all. Or if they give credit, it'll be maybe a 1 hour course elective for the, you know what, 3 or 4 hours of coursework that you did for the actual course. So if you're trying to transfer these sorts of courses to DMAC, you're really just taking the work that that student has done and throwing it in the trash. Because what you're doing now is limiting their transfer capability in the future, which actually limits their opportunity. So ISU broadens that opportunity. DMAC, people would struggle to transfer their courses. That would be limiting their opportunity. So I understand that I'm almost out of time, but I just like to say, please consider thinking about the opportunity involved, the transcripts involved, the help involved, the assistance involved, and also the experience that people could have in particularly lab sessions at ISU. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. All right. We will move on to our next discussion item, which is the review of 2021.
Oh, can I ask a procedural question? Is it possible to ask follow-up questions of Dr. Hawkins or not? If it's not possible under board procedure, it's fine. I just don't know.
I mean, technically we can under a discussion item. We cannot under the public forum.
Right. So I could ask him a follow-up question right now.
But isn't it on,
Is that
could we
possible?
ask under, because it's an action?
It is an action item, so it would probably be better to ask under the action item so that we kind of keep with our policy of not, our practice of not having back and forth conversation from public comments.
Okay. Yes, Madam President.
All right. Review of 2021-22 district goal areas.
Thank you, Director Shields Cook. This item this evening, just want to draw your attention to our board policy 600 that speaks to district goals and objectives. Annually, you identify and adopt the goals for the district, and you did that last spring. Those goals reflect the assessment of the current needs, define the plans for continuous improvement, and focus the efforts of staff for that school year. At this point in the process this evening, we are looking at those goals that were set about this time likely last year and reporting to you the outcome of those goals. We will go through each of the priority areas that the board has established and the data that has been collected. The reason to frame this evening for you is to remind you that in 2 weeks, we'll be taking this information along with information you had 2 weeks ago from the Panorama survey and thinking about where do you want to go in the future for the next school year. So this is really, if you're in that continuous improvement cycle, we are finishing one cycle as a way to consider where we are and establish those goals moving forward. So with that, thanks to Aaron Meek for helping to pull all of this together and for the other directors here that each will report on a section. We'll go ahead and advance the slide to a couple of the opening ones. This is just a review in case our public maybe doesn't remember those priority areas. And then a couple additional statements, one about the data. We'll advance the slide. We are in many cases having to look at our data as baseline data. We have that disruption that we all acknowledge from COVID. And so some of these have not been able to be continuously monitored in the way you might typically. And we'll point that out as we go through. And then finally, just a statement of our objectives this evening. It is to make sure we are completing that cycle from the work that was set last spring and preparing to reset goals moving forward. So with that, our first area has to do with our goal 1, which is educational equity and improvement.
Thank you. All right, so we actually had 5 goals in the educational equity and improvement under that priority. So you can see the first 2 are on this slide here, and we've met the first one, which was for this school year to have 3rd graders increase the percentage of 3rd graders who are proficient in reading. And you can see last year we had kind of a dip in our reading proficiency at 3rd grade and then came back up again this year. We did not meet the second goal in this category, which was to increase the percentage of students in 8th grade meeting the algebra readiness indicator as measured by the MAP assessment. If we go to the next slide. These 2 goals, goals 3 and 4, have to do with graduation rates and push out rates. So these are in progress, and goal 3 actually doesn't end until the end of next school year. So it'll actually be winter to spring of the year following that before we'll know if we've met that goal, because there's a lag in the data that we get from the state. And then for goal number 4, that one is also in progress and is a goal that's written in such a way that it will likely always be in progress because it's a continuous goal. You can see we had kind of a higher push out rate year before last and then dropped back down again. So we're hoping to continue on that dropping down pattern. So then if we can go to the next slide, please. Goal 5 is actually broken down into 4 separate slides here by year. So starting with the 2018-19 school year. And as you can see, if we look at all of the AP courses for Ames High School, in that particular school year, we had Asian students were overrepresented in a statistically significant way, and Black or African American students were underrepresented in among students enrolled in AP courses. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that that trend continued in the 2019-20 academic year. And then if we go to the next slide, you can see that we actually met our goal, which was related to underrepresented groups. So Black and African American students were no longer underrepresented in AP courses at Ames High School in 2020 to 21, which was last year. And then if you go to that final slide in this section, we still don't have an underrepresentation. So we have a proportional representation among Black or African American students, but now we have an underrepresentation among Hispanic or Latino students.
Priority 2 is transparent financial planning and processes, and there were 2 goals under this. The first one is that by the end of 21-22 that we'll have a short-term and long-term financial forecasting model, and we did implement Forecast 5. We have been using Forecast 5 since I believe October of 2020. So we view that this one's met. I will state on using a forecasting model that there are a couple things that are beyond our control. And I think if you'll look over the last 2 years that those became very obvious. One is that we can't always control what our enrollment trend is going to be. The other is that we do not control how much our state supplemental aid will grow. And we don't often know that until about a month before we need to do our budget. So while we're trying to use the forecasting tool, we don't always have a couple of big pieces of information that we need to know that is beyond our control. The second, so we do say that that status has been met. And the second goal is that we will utilize a student-based funding process, and that during the 21-22 school, the superintendent and I would implement an evidence-based staffing model. We did do that with Dr. Vincent's expertise in those models. And so we did use that for our budget this year. And that student achievement data would be considered, and it was. There were many different factors, and I think Dr. Vincent has gone through those factors with you before, as far as free and reduced percentages. You're going to have to help me. English language learners, and some of those things contribute to that. Do you want to add any more to the model? The only other thing that we did want to tell you, and I will hand these out, is that while it wasn't a goal of the transparent financial, I have revived the big comprehensive budget book. There will be a lot of information in here that will help you as far as looking at trends in the past, projections into the future. I think we're going to try sometime in June when Dr. Lawson is here to sit down and go through this and kind of walk you through what all's in it, but we're going to go ahead and let you take them tonight and go through them. There's a lot of information on how the school aid formula works. There's a lot of information on property tax rates and property valuations and enrollments and all sorts of information that I use, but don't necessarily always present to the board. So I think that's all we had on this one.
So I've been asked to talk about priority 3, which is recruitment, retention, and development of a high quality staff. We had 3 specific goals that related to this priority. One was on measuring implementation data of professional development. Essentially, the notes there stress that professional development has been challenging to present in a consistent fashion during the pandemic and during years where other stresses created priority. So in full transparency to the board, an implementation monitoring system for specific system-wide professional development did not occur. It is our intention that as we implement our instructional framework to develop an implementation monitoring tool to monitor that implementation with that specific strategy. And then it would be my goal to continue to expand our use of implementation monitoring tools beyond Danielson as well. But that would be, I would say, not met because it hasn't been done. It's technically in progress, but I would want the board to know that there hasn't been monitoring of that kind. The next goal is also in progress. Aaron, I may need your assistance with this one. The goal is written as that by the end of this year, staff demographics will represent a more diverse population that is reflective of our student population. And you can see the demographic breakdown of our staff. We did have data last year, but it is I believe our data collection processes are not compatible to comparing last year to this year. Help me out a little bit.
Sure thing. So if you all remember the demographics report, the staff demographics report that was completed last fall, if you weren't here, I'd be happy to share that with the board members who weren't present. So we did a 5-year, I'll stand so you can see me. We did a 5-year analysis of our staff demographics and breakdown by race and ethnicity and gender to see, because this is a board goal, we wanted to see our progress toward meeting this goal. The program that we use, Grantwood, right, as our employment sort of tracking system has changed and now allows us to be able to see folks who identify as multiracial. That was not an option in previous years. So this year we have a more accurate representation of folks, racial and ethnic identities, which is why we didn't want to compare years, because realistically we're looking at kind of a new data set now. We'll continue to use the same data set in years forward to see how this changes.
Thank you, Aaron. And then the last goal for this priority is written around staff response to questions on the Panorama survey around coaching and feedback. Specifically, that we would increase the percent of respondents who respond favorably around that topic of coaching and feedback. Again, you can see this goal is not met. We decreased by 1% of favorable responses. If you recall from our Panorama review, we decreased in most of our areas on the Panorama, including all areas except for one. Remember, there's seven board goals that are measured. We decreased in all areas except for one. Not trying to. We decreased by 1% here, but we did not meet the goal. You can see, in my opinion, there's been significant progress since the beginning of the goal, but we did not meet the goal this year.
Thank you. Good evening, board. How are you guys doing? I worked with Director Schmidt on the clear and consistent communication piece. So Amy, if you can go to the next slide. We had 2 goals in this area. The first one was responding to the question about knowing how to communicate with their school. You can see over the last 3 years, we've held pretty steady. Technically, this goal is not met because, again, we did decrease by 3 percentage points in the most recent year. I will just point out, as Eric and I were looking at that, we did see a celebration in this, being that it is 81%. And if you think about last year and some of the communication challenges of going to online learning and after online learning and all that fun stuff, we did kind of see that as a celebration, even though technically the goal is not met. You can scroll to the next one, Amy. This was another one that technically, because of the way it's wording, we chose to make it in progress. And we think this one, as written now, will continually be in progress. But we have made some significant strides in terms of increasing the modes of communication. We have a very clear process now when you do registration for families' preferred language, and that now filters over into Blackboard and all of our messages. There was a time in the past where we kind of struggled to know which families wanted, say, a Spanish translation versus an English translation. That's been cleared up pretty consistently. We also have our mass notification system is established, so if we have to send out emergency alerts or anything like that, again, we've got our translators and stuff on standby. We do a much better job of that now than we've done in years past. All building level mass communications are sent in the 5 languages you see there. English, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, and Vietnamese. those represent really, I think, the largest populations in our system of families that speak a first language other than English. And we've also, this is probably one of the cooler ones that we haven't done a lot with yet, but we've signed a contract with a company that offers on-demand translation services. So all of our buildings and all of our secretaries have a number that they can call if there's a language that maybe we don't speak or we don't have translators handy. We have that ability. So huge improvements in this area, technically, again, in progress, and it's one we'll continue to work on as a district.
All right, I've got priority 5, the safe and responsible system that promotes mental health and well-being of every individual. And you'll see on our first slide, this is a student measure, so measures of belonging. The goal was by the end of the school year to increase the percent of respondents who respond favorably in Panorama to classroom or school belonging. Classroom belonging is that 3rd through 5th grade rating. School belonging is the 6th through 12th. That's just, again, how those students experience school as a classroom or as a school. And you will see from our graphs that this goal was not met. We did see decreases in the 3rd through 5th grade of classroom belonging of about 10 points and decrease in our secondary of about 6 points in sense of belonging. And overall, you can see our belonging, classroom belonging, that 3rd through 5th grade is higher than our 6th through 12th. That is consistent. You can see through 3 years within the district, and also matches national trends for that. On the second slide, you will see the family response for that. And our goal is written as a measure of school fit for families. And that data is presented there. School fit is defined as the family's perception of how well a school matches the child's developmental needs. And so you'll see the 3 years of data technically not met, since it has remained the same at 54%. I did include the data for school safety, and the definition for that is perceptions of physical and psychological safety at school. I thought that also spoke very well towards this goal and this priority. Unfortunately, we did see decreases in that this year as well, about 15 points from the previous year. And now, in conclusion, to the next slide.
Restating what we'd commented on earlier, this is just wrapping that cycle and thinking about, so what are the implications as we move forward, continuing that journey of continuous improvement? Where do we need to put the most emphasis? Are the priorities going to continue the same? Might you shift them? We've had conversation among our directors group about it's very likely that at some point in the next few months, the district will engage in a broad scale strategic planning effort. But the goals, we want to have something that we are working on and focusing on, even as that work may take us in a different direction. We think that may take a few months to complete, and that's the reason for coming back just at the next meeting to look at goal areas. So with that, any comments or questions?
This is going back to priority number 1, educational equity and improvements. I don't know if this is for Deanie or for Dr. Hawkins. How are those disparities in representation in the accelerated classes being addressed so that we don't continue to fail to meet our goals?
So our action steps for that goal in particular related to the work that we're doing through the course registration and guidance process, as well as teachers recruiting students to get into their classes. So a process of our counseling staff working with teachers to identify students that might be good recruits to the class, and then the processes through course registration to make sure that students are aware of those opportunities to get signed up.
So would it be fair to say that this year we haven't done that as well as we might?
Well, I would say, looking at the data particularly, it would look like maybe we haven't done that as well with our Hispanic and Latino groups, and we continue to see a statistically significant overrepresentation of students identifying as Asian.
Right.
So we've seen some variance in the data around so we haven't yet seen the for lack of a more technical way to say it, we haven't seen the orange line and the black line on this graph equate to each other for our Black students. But what we have seen is a change in the statistically significant underrepresentation of them. But we still have groups of students that are overrepresented in AP classes, and we have groups of students that are underrepresented. So maybe one of the things that we need to consider to connect to what Dr. Vincent was just saying as we look at our educational equity plan is, do we need to look at some different strategies for that process?
Yeah, I'm not on the equity committee, but it's a concern for me that those disparities continue to exist, and at least for our Hispanic Latinx students, they're worsening.
Yeah. So I have several questions, not surprisingly. So the first question is just about the data availability. I noticed we didn't really talk about this in the presentation, but I see that we're sort of toggling back and forth between the present school year being the most current year of data and the last school year being the most current year of data. So when we're looking at the last school year, we're looking at data that are probably from tests that may have been taken 15 months ago even, right? So how do we, I mean, can you help me connect the dots? What should I make of data that showed that we were doing badly 15 months ago?
Sure. Do you want me to start? Okay. So I'll start. So for example, one of the data sets that I know that always lags, as Deanie suggested, was the graduation rate data set. So while we do work to calculate our graduation rate at the time of graduation ceremony so that we have a sense of where we're at, there's quite a bit of work that the state does in order to process students that have transferred in and transferred out. And so we typically don't get official graduation rate data until December following our graduation class. It's a once a year data set that typically has about a 6 or 7 month lag. This year it came out in March, so it was more like a 10-month lag. Our state's busy too with the pandemic, I'm going to presume. When we look at our ISASP data, that too is a once a year data set. So I would say generally speaking, the data sets that occur least frequently are the ones that we're going to reference to last year. Whereas data sets that we give more frequently, we're able to better refer to current year data.
So for instance, for AP classes, I mean, is that not data that we collect internally? Is that data that we're getting from the state?
No. Well, I mean, we do get data from College Board about participation in tests and scores and trends like that, but we definitely are able to keep that data internally. So we do have some semester-long AP courses that we're really not able to measure until at least we get into second semester in order to see whether students stay with the course.
Okay.
But that is definitely data we have internally.
Okay, it's just that we're looking at data that's a year old there.
No.
It's 2020. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's 21, 21, 22. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was looking at something wrong.
I would also point out, just if I could, on slide 6, the ISASP data for this year. So that is an internal calculation that I did based on the information that we currently have, which is only students who tested online. It does not include paper tests because those aren't graded yet. I'm checking every day, they're still not done. And as well as it would include students that maybe some of our students who are dual enrolled, some of our students who are homeschool students who came in to test with us, that will not be included in our accountability rating from the state. So that's just something to keep in mind, that number, I would give it, a percentage point of error at the minimum. So but our ISASP data for the year has been able to be at least sort of a cursory glance of how we're doing. The actual state report for ISASP is not likely to be released until August, if not later.
All right, thank you. Oh, my second question. The particularly item number 2 under priority 1, I find really concerning. Actually, we have it up here by coincidence. We have it up here right now. the right-hand bar or the right-hand figure there shows that we've had a decrease in algebra readiness in 8th grade by, gosh, 20, well, it's about, it's about a 20% drop. It's a 17 percentage point drop, which is about a quarter of the percentage, a quarter of the portion. Do we have a sense of what's driving this? Have you all started internal conversations with teachers and experts about what's happening that's leading to this drop?
I guess I could speak to when this is pulled. This is from fall data, fall to fall to fall, because the spring scores were not yet available for our current testing window. Our buildings are still finishing. So that's something to keep in mind, just that this is fall to fall to fall. And it would assess, how students are at the beginning of the year as opposed to at the end of the year. I would still expect it to be similar to this, but because we don't like to compare fall to spring to winter data. They're separate data sets. We expect students to be in different places at those times. So that's just something to think about, but I think that Dr. Hawkins to speak to how we're addressing this particular.
So yes, I have conversations with our, in this case, middle school administration on what's happening. They have a process for intervention, but I think maybe really pertinently here, I would remind our board, we were unable to hire the math interventionist that data had suggested we needed to target with that building with ESSER funds last year. So in other words, we saw a data trend. We tried to take advantage of a money source in order to increase intervention there. We were unable to hire that this year. I'm excited to say that I believe we have hired it for the next year. So that's part of a process of intervention, is to hire additional specialists. As you know, we're also implementing some after-school tutoring programs targeted towards math this year, not necessarily at the 8th grade level, but hopefully building skill in the gaps that exist. Again, some of the data that is I've referenced in other meetings in the past would show we certainly have gaps, particularly demographically, for some of the same groups that we've talked about, that show gaps of math readiness as they enter into 6th grade. So some of the solving of this problem needs to be done, not just at our middle school level. And so then the last comment I would make is on June 7th and 8th, we're having all buildings come in and work with myself and potentially members from Heartland AEA as consultants to do an overall assessment of their data, their process for intervention, their MTSS process is what we would call it, and then create building level action plans where they're targeting specific data sets with strategies, and then we'll work to see if there's any kind of resource allocation that we need to reconsider based on those action plans.
One question I have, Chris, the document that you produced, will that be available online for the public to see? I know we've gotten some requests recently for kind of having access to transparent financial data.
So I was holding off until after this meeting. Our plan is to post the executive summary, as well as the budget presentation we did at budget time, as well as the forms we normally post. So I don't know that posting 130-page documents probably the thing to do, but the executive summary, which really recaps the budget, has all of the budget actions, a history of the tax rates, lots of nice pretty graphs, that will be posted on the web.
All right. And I think maybe as we see how people receive that, maybe we could consider more sharing for transparency, because none of it's all public, none of it's hidden. And it's a really good way to present it, I think. That oftentimes when community members ask me something about the budget, I would just like to point them at a link and say, read this awesome thing Chris produced. So
I think it's more the financial section is also what we have traditionally put on, which is the recap of the budget by funds. I don't, like we've got 20 years of sales tax projections. Those are the kind of things that we probably won't put all that on the web.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase my question. So our next step is meeting with what it says, engaging with Dr. Lawson and building leaders at the next meeting. For you as our district leadership and admin team, is there work that you do with this, and perhaps you've already done it, and it sounds like Dr. Hawkins, when you talk about working with the leadership at the middle school, that some has done. But can you give us a high level idea of the work that takes place for all of you with building leaders, perhaps prior to June 6th, because the whole intention of this is for our oversight to say, what is that high level of the priorities and goals you've established? How did you do? You presented it to us. Thank you. This hasn't been done. Thank you for letting us know how you have been doing. But then what does this look like as we move forward as a district in identifying what we do need to prioritize and what we as a board need to hone in on and pay attention to?
When you think about data and using that data to actually drive system improvement, obviously most of these are lag measures. And depending on the months, as Director Erica Smith pointed out, you wonder, is that really the best you can do? But they are very much so summative measures. As we work with the buildings, we are trying to get them to think now about what are some of the lead measures that they can be adjusting over time. Our teachers do that every day in the classroom. And then the PLCs, you hope, do that on a more frequent basis as they're planning units. That comes up through the building leadership then, and some of the work that I've observed Dr. Hawkins and other directors around the table do in terms of having opportunities for the entire district leadership, principals, and district office together to look at the various data sets, see where we are, what strategies are we using. And it, of course, feeds into then the planning of how are we going to work on those equity goals? How are we going to work on whatever goal it might be? Some of the specifics of how that rolls out, though, I think Dr. Hawkins could add some of that detail. But it's all those measures feeding up through this focus that has been established.
So I'd like to try to answer your question in two parts. I heard you, I believe, wisely say, we need these are goals and they represent priorities, and we have other conversations we need to have to figure out how do we prioritize work within those priorities. And I think it's important for us as a system to have that June 6th conversation with Dr. Lawson and really think about how many different ways do we believe we can focus our attentions and action plans on goals and make significant progress that we want to make. So I'm really excited for that board meeting to have those conversations. We've got an educational equity plan that several committees have been working with that have 3 primary goal areas already identified with some theories of action. Where does that lead us? And what are the conversations that Dr. Lawson wants to have with us about strategic planning? And how do we become I would suggest, again, it will be up to us as a group, but I would suggest maybe from broadly focused to laser focused on some things that we really want to leverage. I think for me, that's part of the answer to your question, is the process that we will take to become very aligned and focused in that goal work. From a day-to-day work with buildings, to answer that aspect of your question, so my routines normally, when I'm allowed to visit buildings and when when professional development is operating regularly and building principals are able to focus on the full scope of their work. So I'm giving some caveats here. I haven't felt like what my job would normally look like what it's been looked like for about 1.5 years, to be really frank with you. But maybe longer. But when I'm doing my job routinely, I'm meeting. The first few months of my job looked like I met with principals twice a month. Once a month was their agenda. Once a month was them pulling a data set that related to their building goals that they'd established through some of those summer type processes that I described, and doing some analysis of where are you at on your action steps towards those building goals, and what is your current data, if there is lead data, to show me where you're at with that. So I'm really hopeful that next year we can return to that routine. We typically have been having principals come together. So for example, last Thursday, we had principals come together They looked at their panorama data set. They dug in deeply to some of the measures that you were asking about, Director Smith, about like, show me how it breaks down demographically. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look online and dig into some of those electronically, like we were talking about at that board meeting, but principals did. They identified specific action steps that they could work into building goals around classroom belonging or sense of belonging, with the idea that then that would relate to building goals. Again, assuming that that's where we align in our conversation to the June 6th, because goal number 3 in the educational equity plan right now is about climate and culture. So we're kind of at this stage, in my opinion, of really trying to get a sense of refocusing on what are those primary areas of focus and what strategies best will yield work, and then getting back into routines with principals on how do we stay on top of that on a regular basis. Both through when we pull them in for professional development as well as when we visit their buildings.
Thank you for that description. I appreciate it. I think it's helpful for us as a board to understand the work you do, not the details always of the work, but just the broad idea of how these things and the things that we discuss then guide the things that you are doing with your building leaders. So thank you for giving us that information.
Okay. So I have, if that's okay, a further question, comment about priority 1, item 5. We want to, we're doing this later. Yeah, if we can scroll down to any of these. Yeah, we can stop there. That's a fine one that we can stop at. So reading the goal, sorry, I'm about to get kind of nerdy, but so reading this goal here, the statement says, by the end of the 21-22 school year, we will show a statistically significant increase in the percentage of students from underrepresented groups participating in accelerated classes. I don't think that what you're showing us here, Erin, is actually measuring the goal as it's stated.
I did not do the data analysis.
Okay.
Slides. That was done by Director.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Dini. So I don't think that this is actually showing us the measuring the thing that the goal is saying that we're going to measure. Sorry, Dini. So you're showing us the statistical significance in the gap between the expected and observed. But we're talking here about a statistically significant increase in the percentage of students who are enrolled. So have you, so you're showing us the gap, but have you measured whether the percentage of students enrolled has increased statistically significantly between one year and the next?
It has. It has, and it would be almost impossible with where we started in the underrepresented group to show a statistically significant increase.
Okay, so let's say that there's, say, 3% of students enrolled in AP classes were African American in 2018 to 2019, and we're talking maybe 5% in 2020 to 21, just eyeballing your figures. So that increase from, say, 3% to 5% in those 3 years was not statistically significant.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I started here. When the goal was initially written, the underrepresented groups were not actually identified through statistical analysis.
Okay.
So that's what I've given you here is a demonstration of where we started, which group was underrepresented, and then where we are now. They're no longer underrepresented.
So if we scroll down to, say, the 2020 to 2021 to 2022, we see again, we're looking at gaps between expected and observed, but not statistical significance of change over time.
Yeah.
Which is actually what the goal was framed as being. Okay.
You're right.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I guess the last comment I have is thank you for presenting the data, especially thank you for presenting the ones that we didn't meet. I know that can require some courage, but that's the good thing about doing this. And I'd like us to continue doing this each year to look directly at what we're seeing and how we did.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is our public forum. So I will open our public forum and read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we will start with Sophia Cordova. We will put our 3-minute timer up here. We'll give you about a 30-minute grace period, just so you know. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
We're going to be here a while.
Sorry, Sophia.
Good job.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia Cordova. I'm a senior at Ames High School, and I'll be attending Columbia University in the fall. So I'm speaking today, obviously for my own, but also on behalf of several students in the room today, and many who are not here today, but who are big fans of the band program. And I'm sure there's many other community members who would agree with several of the things I'm about to tell you today. So today we're here against some of the proposed changes to staffing in the band department, specifically having only 2 band instructors at Ames High School. I've been part of the band program since 5th grade. I've played the flute since 5th grade. And in my time during the band program, I've played the saxophone in middle school. I've played trumpet this year in high school, and I've also played piccolo. And these opportunities were only afforded to me because of the support that I had from my instructors. I remember in, for example, 7th grade, having the opportunity, one time I forgot my flute, and I was able to play it off of the instrument of my instructor, the band director that I had at the time. And it was those little meaningful one-on-one interactions that really inspired me to try harder at the flute and to care about the band program. And this is the same for many other members of the program. These experiences build not just like the one-on-one community between you and your instructor, but also strengthen love for the program for everybody who's involved. And this is why it's the most popular extracurricular at Ames High School and in our district. And because of this, because of that the great program that we do have here, we have plenty of all-staters, probably the most in the entire state, and we have music that's loved by all the community. I mean, we have students coming in from Gilbert just to watch our concerts because we're known for how beautiful the music that we create is. And that's because of that one-on-one instructional time. I mean, band is very unique in that you need to have that instructional one-on-one time, because when you have so many different instruments and so many different players, it's kind of hard to offer an instruction. Like, there's no curriculum for that, right? You have like, for example, like algebra classes, there are certain standards that you need to cover, and you can teach something to the whole class, and you can have one-on-one time when necessary. But with flute, everyone is at a different place, or with every other band instrument, you need that one-on-one time to be able to develop properly into the musician that you want to be. And because of that, we've been able to have plenty of music majors in the past. There's some in this crowd here that are going to be studying music because of the support that they've had. We've had band directors come out of the high school, and many others who continue to choreograph in, say, LA, thanks to the support that our instructors such as Chris Ewan have been able to provide to them. And a lot of research has found that the process of learning an instrument is not beneficial just for you musically, but also academically. The process of having the discipline of learning an instrument, of learning to read music, that can benefit people, and has shown, a lot of studies have shown that it's actually increased academic performance as well. So it's not just tied to the band program, but it's also tied to the district as a whole and the quality of students that we produce. So band gives a number of opportunities for growth, not just musically, but also as a person. And it's the capacity of all of these opportunities are really dependent on the quality, the energy, and the abundance of our staffing. So I would definitely oppose the changing proposal of our staff. And I'd say that we definitely need 3 instructors. I mean, we have over 100 students in the band. That's only possible for everyone to play beautifully the way that we do today, with the amount of instructors we currently have. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Andres Cordova.
My name is Andres Cordova. I am a former Ames High student attending Duke University. My address is 3215 Duke Circle. I come to you now speaking about a proposal to cut to the fine arts. A lot of people here are here to oppose this, especially in the high school. So I'll spend a little more time on actually the middle school. When I began my time at Ames Middle School, there were 3 conductors that led me to my years. During every single concert, I got to hear the improvement of not only our band, but the superior sound quality of the 7th grade band, of the 8th grade band, and hearing how next year I could improve to be to this level. Our band could be this good next year. And it continued this way all the way up to high school, where I could continue feeling that we could be the better band. We could be the same band I saw last year that blew my mind. That was just that superior sound quality that you can't get anywhere else. For this reason, I think AMS at minimum requires one permanent conductor and one liaison between the middle school and the high school. The AHS band program is massive and successful compared to other programs in the state. This is mostly due to the conductors, especially I refer to Chris Ewan and Andrew Buttermore, two spectacular conductors currently at Ames High. They teach a marching band, which they raised from scratch, having no marching experience in the 9th grade, 3 concert bands, several jazz bands, and the pep band. Even with teaching assistants, this is a full all hands on deck operation. To give lessons to this many people takes everything they have, and they give us all they have. If we were to cut down how many of our conductors are available for this, we would decrease tremendously in both the amount of bands we can offer and the quality we can offer in lessons. I've heard from some that there's a misconception on the board that our most successful students primarily learn through ISU professors of the sort. Well, this is certainly true for a few of the students at Ames High. The fact is, most of these private lessons are A, not covered through PSEO options, B, are very, very costly and are just simply not available to most of this higher echelon. If you ask most of Wind Symphony, they will not be saying that they have taken instruction at a private institution. Lessons and tutelage at school fill this gap and add into the band's great success that we've witnessed throughout all these years, and that give all the support that we continue to see year after year. I urge the board to reconsider these cuts that they are proposing. I yield my time.
Thank you, Andres. Ava Chopsky.
Hi, my name is Ava Chopsky. I'm a current high school senior at Ames High, and I'm going to be attending the University of Iowa in the fall. So I have been involved in the band program since I was in 5th grade as well, and this year I was the student voted vice president, so I kind of have a unique outlook on the band as I'm right in the middle of it. And this year, especially, as well as all 4 years that I've been in the band program, I've learned that our band isn't just a bunch of students getting together because they need a fine arts credit, but it's really a community, and the connections that students make, not just between other students, but between the band teachers, is so special. And there's so many different talents ranging from being in the Wind Symphony to the concert band. But that being said, our band is so talented. We have so many all-staters every year and so many people who get ones on their solo and ensemble contests. And that is truly because of the one-on-one time that a student has the opportunity to spend with a director. So I'm in the jazz band, the Wind Symphony, the drumline, and I've made all-state 2 times. So I'm pretty involved in the band program. And the way that I have thrived is through our band lessons that we have with teachers, where each every week you can have like a 45 basically private lesson with a teacher. And so that is so crucial for some people. And while I as well am privileged enough to be able to take private lessons, that is not a financial option for many students. And so they need that one-on-one time with a band teacher. And not only are the one-on-one times critical, but our groups are so talented as well. Just off the top of my head, I can think of, we have 3 jazz bands, a pep band, 4 concert bands, a marching band, a drum line, 2 jazz combos, people who try out for all-state, people who do solo ensemble contests, and so many other honor bands that people can audition for. And that's a lot for just 3 band directors to do. So with just 2 band directors, the quality of these isn't going to be able to be as good, and some of them might not even be able to happen. And then the last thing that I just wanted to say is I have been so inspired in all my 4 years of being in this band program. I'm actually going to the University of Iowa to major in music, and I truly don't think that I would have been able to do that if it hadn't been for our amazing instructors and the connections that I've been able to make with them. So I was able to find my passion through this band program, and I think that every kid deserves to be able to find their passion as well in the coming years, which can be done through those connections made with a band teacher, which is why we need 3. We have 260 kids in our band right now, which is so many. And so every kid should be able to have that opportunity to establish a great connection with a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Tate Meinhardt?
Hi, my name is Tate Meinhardt. I'm a senior at Ames High School currently, and I would also like to speak on behalf of the 3 directors at Ames High Bands. So I'm not the best musician in Ames High, but it's provided such like a valuable experience for me. It teaches you so many things, not just about how to read music, how to play music, but like confidence to get up and perform in front of your peers, and the discipline that it took in the earlier years to sit down every night and practice the instrument. And that's translated really well to like studying. And I think that it translates really well. Teaching band to students translates really well to other areas of academics. I've made a lot of connections with the directors and other students of this band. And yeah, I would hate to have other students coming after me not to be able to make those connections and form those friendships and that teacher to student relationship that I've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Tate. Jerry Hahn?
Hi again, my name is Jerry Hahn and I'm a senior at Ames High School. And although most of what I've wanted to say has already been covered by Tate, Ava, Sophia, and Andres, I'd just like to add some about the aspects of the band directors that go somewhat unnoticed currently, and just how hard they have to work to have all these wonderful events for the community. So as Ava mentioned, there's all of these ensembles. We have 4 jazz bands if you include spring jazz, and each of these concerts take so much planning and so much time and effort that wouldn't be expected of a teacher in maybe any other field, when you can look at them getting up super early in the morning to prepare percussion instruments and whatnot for our trips down to Indianola High School for all say auditions. Or you could look at them cleaning up after we have concerts that go into the night. And I would just like to say that it'd be difficult for any teacher to take care of hundreds of teenagers, much less when there's instruments that make noise. So I'd just like to thank the band directors for all the hard work that they do. And I would also like to advocate for the remaining 3 band directors in the Ames High Band program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Ian Nelson?
Hello, my name is Ian Nelson. I'm also a senior at Ames High. Again, I'm also not the best musician in the entire band program. However, I feel like I can speak on behalf of my peers and the band directors that the experiences that the band program has offered me through its benefits, through academics, the friendships and the opportunities that it's been able to afford to me, even though I'm not very good. I've played in the pep band, the jazz band, and just the normal band and marching band. It's just the opportunities that it's been able to give to me, I think, are extremely valuable. And I think I don't feel that the same opportunities at the same level would be able to be afforded with lower teaching staff than us. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And Tracy Turner.
Yes, hi, I'm Tracy Turner, 3040 Bayberry Road. I have 2 sons in the band program, and it's been spectacular and wonderful for many, many years to see them inspired and engaged. I have a couple points I'd like to bring to your attention. First, I wish to speak towards this proposal, sort of on the table, to reduce the number of staff for band, number of band teachers. And I'd like to say that Well, first, I oppose that. I think it's very important, and we've heard today already this evening so many aspects of the importance of the band program, the music program in our district. But I'd like to say a couple things. Firstly, when I've sent a couple emails out to folks who think this is necessary to do this cut, one reply I get is that the new staffing model has set these cuts fairly based on teacher to student ratio, and that the estimated band teacher to student ratio would be 1 to 100 if the cut occurs, which, it's been pointed out to me, is still lower than other core subjects such as mathematics. Now, these core subjects are both extremely important, but one is intensely specialized and the other is not. One teaches a uniform curriculum across their 100, 150 students. And as we've heard this evening, one has to provide very specialized, individualized training to students in a subject area that is by definition very specialized. And in response to that argument that the ratio across these core subject matters makes sense to have them more equalized, I would say that doesn't make sense to me because of the specialization of music. And music ought to have a lower teacher to student ratio for these reasons, as well as for the reasons we've heard this evening from students who've been in the program. I'd also like to address, I've been told, thank you for your comments. We know music and band is fantastic in our district. And we have very gifted teachers and students, but the band will be okay. The program will be okay. Prior to 2019, we only had 4 or 5 teachers across middle school and high school. Band will still be good. And I'd like to say that we should ask the band teachers. We should ask the students. And on whom will the burden fall of fewer resources being allocated to students in music when nearly 1 in 5 in our district are in music in the middle school and high school? And I worry that's going to fall on families with fewer resources. I'm sure you worry that as well. How many kids can't take private lessons? How many kids are going to be left to learn more on their own instead of with individualized instruction that's currently offered? Fewer hours of instruction, there's no way around it. That's fewer hours of instruction. And how many kids are going to give up? How many kids maybe won't down the road get music scholarships to college as a result? So, as a parent, I have to worry, why can't the board take a second look or a third look or a fourth look at possibilities rather than cutting band? Maybe it's a sensible outcome because of this giant budget deficit of $1 million, but for so many reasons it's not. Maybe it's the easiest to not rehire or fill an empty position, not try to replace Mr. Ewan. But why not take that extra look, especially, hopefully, as you hear from parents and students who feel that this will be very impactful on students in our district and on families in our district to reduce the instruction hours. Finally, I would like to say thank you for your service and all the work that you do as board members. And I'd like to say, what are we known for? As a school district, known for music. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, we don't have anyone else signed up to speak as part of our public forum, so I will go ahead and close the public forum and move on to our consent items.
I move approval of consent items as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. Superintendent Vincent.
It's my pleasure this evening to thank several donors. Once again, the generosity of this community just continues to astound. This evening, I want to express specific thanks to Aaron and Laura Bernard. They've provided a gift for the boys tennis program. We also have a gift from Mary Jo and John Boert for Ames Middle School, and an anonymous donor for the Lunch Hero program. I don't know if you can appreciate all those contributions and what a difference they make, but I think in a time like this evening when we are looking at budget cuts, I hope you know that those contributions all do make a difference and are very much appreciated.
Thank you, Superintendent Vincent. It was moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum to approve the consent items as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our action items. Our first item is the 2021-22 proposed budget amendment.
I move the board adopt the budget amendment as presented.
Second. Moved by Franzen, seconded by Winfrey. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Next item is the resolution approving the application for the purpose of applying for Variety, the children's charity.
I move the board approve the resolution regarding the approval of the application for the purpose of applying to Variety, the children's charity.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Becker, and this will be a roll call vote.
Director Franzen?
Are we not going to have discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm not saying I have a question, but I think we should offer that. I'm so sorry.
Does anyone have questions or comments?
As somebody that was on the Park and Rec Commission when they did the Miracle Playground and has kids love to go there and stuff, I think this is great. I love the idea of adapting our playgrounds for more of our students. I'm fully in support of this resolution. I guess the question I would have is, it kind of surprised me that this didn't come to facilities in some way as like something for the district to do some things about too. So I think that's maybe something we want to consider going forward for all of our students and making, all these playgrounds accessible. How can we do that without having to put all of it back on the community to fundraise? There might be some things to think about there, but that's part of a larger discussion I would just bring up. So.
And I want to just give a shout out as the parent of a Northwood kid to the PTO who's done a lot of fundraising the past few months too towards this playground. They've done a lot of work.
I might like to just clarify a little bit, Director Beerbaum. I do believe the idea of accessible playgrounds district-wide is being considered as how it will be worked into the PEPL budget over time. This particular application, as I understand it, would be a very extensive renovation. And there may be timing-wise ahead of being able to do that as a whole district and perhaps beyond the scope. I don't know that I know that specifically, but it made sense to me that if there's an opportunity, they may want to proceed. I don't think that prevents us as a district from looking at similar support, if you will, from the district. So appreciate your comments, and I think that's in the works.
Thank you. All right, moved by Winfrey, seconded by Becker, and we will do our roll call vote.
First. Director Franzen?
Aye.
Director Smith? Aye. Director Shields Cook?
Aye.
Director Becker?
Aye.
Director Beerbaum?
Aye.
Director Winfrey?
Aye. Passes 6-0. Concurrent enrollment courses. And I will entertain a motion.
I'll do the motion so we can move it to discussion. I move the board approve the courses recommended here as contracted courses with DMAC for concurrent enrollment, and that the board approve the measures recommended here as alternate ways students can show proficiency to take these courses.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
Am I allowed to ask? Yeah, questions as well as stuff, Dr. Hawkins. Okay. So I'm a little confused about how much latitude we have. What discretion do we have in choosing courses that go on our concurrent enrollment list and or offering PSEO as an alternative?
So I've engaged in 2 different conversations with Jen Rathje. I didn't do that earlier. I don't know why, but she is the Department of Education liaison that's in charge of Senior Year Plus programming. I read the portion of the paragraph to you as a board earlier where on page 32, it explicitly says, if you're going to have programming that parallels what's offered maybe through a university for PSEO, you must offer it through concurrent enrollment. A subsequent paragraph led me to believe, well, maybe we had a little bit more latitude. So I called Jen and just said, listen, I see these 2 paragraphs as not aligning. Can you clarify for me, do we have the latitude to simply not approve a course as a concurrent enrollment course and unilaterally say that it's a PSEO course? Her answer was, no, the intention of the state aligns to that paragraph that you first read me. We intend you to have these courses be concurrent enrollment courses. Later on, I emailed her about a tangent issue. It was some of the discussion we heard tonight, which, by the way, since you're in the room, you guys did a great job. I love listening to students advocate for themselves. So sorry, a little tangent, but so I'd asked about that travel component. Like, what if we have Iowa State is literally, I Google mapped it. It's 1.1 miles from our high school campus as opposed to 5.6 miles to DMAC. And I thought maybe I could get some latitude there. Her response the second time really stressed that it is up to the board to decide which courses are approved or not approved. So I would offer this. I'm more than happy to ask Jen again, wait a minute, are you trying to tell me we have the ability to approve or not approve? Because the first time I asked the question, you were very clear. No, our intention is that parallel courses are offered through DMAC. My understanding that I'm bringing to you tonight is that we have a choice as to whether we offer programming or don't offer programming. The state and the DE guidance would say that when parallel programming exists, it should be taken concurrent and through the concurrent enrollment pathway. I'm more than happy to go check again to see if we have that latitude, but that's not my understanding currently after checking twice.
Okay, so if we were thinking of this in terms of a decision tree, let's say we have a student who wants to take Intro to Philosophy, which happens to be taught at both DMAC and at ISU. The student who wants to take Intro to Philosophy. So our decision tree would be, I want to take Intro to Philosophy. Is it offered at DMAC? Yes. And then if it's offered at DMAC, you don't get any other, according to the state, there is no other choice. So it has to be included on our concurrent enrollment list. And once it's included on our concurrent enrollment list, according to the state, there is no other choice. You have to take it through. That
is my understanding. If it makes the board feel more reassured, I'm more than happy to check into that again. That is my understanding after talking with the state about it 2 different times.
Can I ask one related question? That's if the student doesn't want to pay though, right?
That is correct.
I see, and I just looked up, high school students can simply apply to Iowa State and get credit. So are we potentially setting up a system here where some parents in town might choose to pay for something?
Well, okay, so
and others might not have that opportunity.
I would argue the state has set up that system though.
Potentially.
Not us. Yeah.
So correct. I'm just saying the way it's going to play out, right? I'm thinking.
But it sounds like it's either it stinks because it sounds like that we need to talk to the legislators and whoever writes the code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the question is that if we don't approve it, then just nobody gets to take it. If we do approve it, then some people can take it, and yes, maybe some will pay extra, but they could still pay extra anyway.
So let me make sure I interject this so that the board can discuss this component. Yes, any student can go out and be a tuition paying member of an institution to take their courses there as long as that institution allows them to do that. We have not had a past practice, is my understanding, of bringing those self-paid tuitioned courses back to our transcript. So when we talk about a PSEO course or a concurrent enrollment course, we have an agreement agreement with that institution and with that student, that not only will they be able to go to that institution and take that course, but we will bring it back to our transcript and it will count towards their 44 credits for graduation and all those other things. We have not had a practice of having those self-paid tuitioned experiences come back onto our transcript. We could elect to do that if we wanted to as a board, but we have not in the past. And so I think that discrepancy is key when we're talking about, well, some kids could just pay tuition to go out and do it. Yes, they could. And they would have that experience. That doesn't mean it would come back to the high school transcript necessarily.
Thank you. So you keep saying the word parallel courses, but from what I've heard from students.
They might define parallel differently than our state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe
again,
not the students, but the institutions that they are seeking to attend next may not define parallel the same way our state does.
That's fair. I don't know that if I asked the folks at Iowa State if they felt like the courses were parallel, what they would say, and to give justice to it, I don't know. If I asked the folks at DMAC if they felt they were parallel, what they might say.
Well, I can tell you Iowa State would say they are, but that speaks to Iowa State, which has a very specific relationship with DMAC, much the way that Ames High does, which wouldn't speak to lots of the other institutions that you all spoke about. So, yeah.
Can I ask just a quick high question? Did we had this as a discussion item? Is there a time constraint on this decision? Is that why it's a discussion item and action item on the same agenda? I'm sure there's a reason. I'm just curious.
Well, there's two components that made me want to make it an action item as quickly as possible. One, to be really frank, I'd like to become compliant with the code.
Sure.
We can get to that, and I don't want to become compliant with the code at the sacrifice or the detriment to what we think is the right philosophy and opportunity. So if we want to be ultra thorough in checking, again, I've said I'm happy to do that. The other thing is we do run so knowing that right now students who want to sign up for concurrent enrollment programming, those opportunities are available now. Again, typically, the routine that we will get into is that these courses are approved with our handbooks when I bring them to you in the fall. So right now, we don't have an approved list of courses, but our students need to sign up. We do run the risk. I don't know the extent of that risk, but we do run the risk of, I'll just use myself, Jeff, going saying, I want to take this course at DMAC, and I register and I get my seat and it's part of my plan. But then when we run our approved list, that course that I want to take is not on the approved list and I need to change my plan. So whenever we can get to this is our list of approved courses, it's going to help our students and our community have a better foothold of what they are able to do. That's the only, that and getting our system to align with state code would be my priorities. But if we want to take until June to do that, if we haven't been in code for a little while, it's not going to break the back to take 2 more weeks. That's my opinion. That's too forward of me. I'm sorry.
So is there any petition process for a student who says Calc 3 at DMAC is not equivalent to Calc 3 at Iowa State?
That was the precise nature of my most recent communication with the Department of Ed, and the quick answer is no.
Okay. Yeah, so I was talking more about academic content, not about like distance in terms of transportation.
And I
But
guess
either way,
yeah, the tricky part of that would be if Iowa State says it's the same class, which they do, because you can, as an Iowa State student, take Calc 3 at DMAC, they will accept at Iowa State.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where the conundrum comes in.
Right. So DMAC, just like we have gone through accreditation processes in order to ensure that when we're having our teachers teach DMAC classes that they align, and their DMAC has gone through their processes also to make sure that when they're offering Calc 2 and Calc 3, that they will be accepted by our region institutions. So within the state of Iowa, I appreciate the example some of our students shared about, I'm going out of state to this institution that won't accept it. And from my experience as a former high school principal, they're exactly correct. but our community colleges have done their work to ensure that those courses will be accepted and will be seen as the same course as our region institutions and many of our private institutions within the state of Iowa.
I think the issue that I have with the whole thing is it removes the decision from the person we actually want it to be with, which is the student. Like if a student wants to take computer science and they want to go to Iowa State or they want to go to DMACC, I'd like them to be able to choose. But we're taking the decision out of their hands. So from my point, yeah, it's not us, it's the state that's taking it out of their hands. From my point of view, I would like to take a little bit more time and get a little bit more clarification. And it doesn't sound like we have to do it tonight, so.
Again, we may, in practicality, we may already be at the place where students are signing up for courses that don't get on an approved list, and we'd have to make that adjustment. While I am anxious to accomplish those two things for our system, again, no, 2 more weeks is not going to be the biggest change. My most genuine response would tell me, I don't think we're going to hear a different answer from the DE in the next 2 weeks, but we can be ultra thorough and ask the question again.
It might make us feel better if we had a couple of weeks. I understand that we have a motion on the floor and we have to act on that.
Yep.
But I, for one, would want to suggest that we postpone action on this item until a subsequent.
Do you have a motion you're suggesting then?
I think we have one, don't we?
There's already a motion on the floor.
Propose that we, motion that we table.
You could
move to table
you
to
can
a
move to
date
table.
certain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you moving to table to a date certain?
I
of the
am, but
next
I'm not
meeting?
sure what the date is again. Is it June 6th?
June 6th.
All right, I would move that we table this motion to our June 6th meeting of the school board.
Second.
Hold on, I gotta write down the motion.
When I just so that I make sure that I get everything the board needs, when we get to items for the staff, can we make sure I'm super clear on exactly what the board would want and need in order to make a decision on June 6th? Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion now on the table to table the motion to our June 6th meeting, and it was moved by Becker, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Nay. So passes 5-1. Okay. And next one would be our materials adoption for AP Government, AP Lit and Composition, and AP Language and Composition.
I move that the board adopt the materials for Advanced Placement Government, Advanced Placement Literature and Composition, and Advanced Placement Language and Composition as presented.
Second.
Moved by Becker, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Policies for action.
I move the board approve policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Franzen. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. New Ames High School construction project change orders.
I move the board approve the change orders for the new Ames High School construction project as presented.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Okay, moving on to our board and staff items. For items from the board, I will start, Dr. Hawkins, with your request. So it would be my understanding that the board would like to know whether it is possible, if a course is offered at DMACC, can we leave it off the concurrent enrollment list in order to allow a student to take it at Iowa State? Am I stating that correctly, board?
And maybe just a general, is there any way in which a student can take this class at Iowa State if it is also offered at DMACC for their high school transcripts? Just any way. Any way we can let them choose.
And maybe the way I would look at that is Iowa State has a PSEO application process, right? if a high school student from Ames High goes and fills that out, what happens? I mean, does that, if you could clarify what would happen if somebody did that? Don't answer that now, but.
Yeah, you'd like, okay, so I've got process for approval of PSEO courses. I've got, is there any way that students can take a course and choose their institution and have it come back to the transcript?
Yep.
I'm just saying.
I appreciate you got the double anyway there.
It's important.
Yeah, you like physically.
Yeah, thank you. It's like looking in a mirror.
I'm interpreting the key to that question is both choice and transcript.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience with me.
Dr. Hawkins, as long as you're, so for me, it would more even just be choice.
So,
because I feel like if they can take it at Iowa State, I think I'm less concerned with whether it comes back to their Ames High transcript, but whether they can take it and have that tuition covered.
Just have to be mindful for some students that might also be meeting their requirement for graduation at the high school.
I think I'm thinking in those very specific examples.
And
that's so hard to answer this question, right? But I'm not supposed to answer right now, right?
Well, I mean, it was on the agenda. Is it?
Well, and I think where we're going to run in is whether we have statutory authority to pay a four-year university other than PSEO. So as I mentioned earlier, PSEO classes by statute are limited to $250 in what we can pay ISU. So if it's not PSEA, whatever, and they want to charge us for the full credit amount, I don't believe we have statutory authority to do that. So
is that a question I'm supposed to be looking into?
So I guess rather than the question of is there any way, it would be, is there any way within PSEO?
Any way within PSEO to offer students choice of what type of institution they go to?
Correct.
May I really, can I answer right now? Really quick. Okay, so the state has been intentional about setting up the types of relationships that we have with post-secondary institutions. So when we talked about concurrent enrollment tonight, that is a relationship between the district and a community college specific to community colleges. That's what it's called, concurrent enrollment. So that label describes that relationship. PSEO is a different type of relationship, and it's with a four-year institution. So our kids who do PSEO opportunities would be going to a four-year school, not to a community college. And so they might have options within PSEO to go to Iowa State or Grandview or, other local colleges. They could PSEO to not just Iowa State, but a PSEO relationship is always going to be a relationship with a four-year college or university. I don't know if I've already answered that question or not as much.
I'll propose one thing, just because we're giving you a list. And this one I think is a simple one. I would be interested to know how Iowa City handles this, because they have the exact same issue with Kirkwood and University of Iowa. And you might know the answer, but you don't have to answer now. I think that would give us a baseline of how other people handle this.
I guess for me, it's less important to me how Iowa City handles it than it is what does the code say and what is the DE telling us we need to do, because maybe they're doing it outside of code like we have been doing as well. So
possibly that would be interesting to know too.
Yep.
Yeah.
They are not. I'm not so sure.
Without it.
Okay, can I review that with you?
Yes, because it was clear as mud, right, Jeff?
Is it possible to have a course offered? Is it possible that if we leave off a course from our list at DMAC, but DMAC still offers it, is it possible for a student to take that through PSEO?
Yes.
Is there any way a student can take a course by choice, choosing which institution, and still have a return their transcript? What is the process for the approval of PSEO courses? Is there a process by which students can choose which institution they take a course from? And how does Iowa City equal this time? Is that an okay paraphrase of the? Okay, thank you. I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins.
Can I ask one more question? When was this code? Maybe you had it
Over a
on,
decade.
what's in, pardon me?
Over a decade.
I was at a long time ago.
So my sense would be this code was put in place to level set or take away our privilege of having a four-year institution in our community.
I think potentially some folks would phrase it just slightly differently. But yes.
I've been here for almost 3 hours.
I want to positively presume that the state's intention wasn't to take away its privilege, but I do believe you're correct in that the vast majority of communities in the state of Iowa don't happen to have a Research One institution 1.1 miles away from their campus. And so setting up relationships where kids can get access to the wonderful things that our students just described about all those great, rich college experiences, setting those opportunities up for the majority of students in the state of Iowa are going to be with community colleges, because not everybody has what we have. So I don't know that they would phrase it as they were trying to take something away from Ames. But yes, I do agree that the intention of the state was to improve access to college courses. And this is the primary way to do this for most communities.
But it's only in the past year that the guidance has become clear, though. I mean, this code's been on the books for a decade.
No,
We've
we just
been out
have
of
compliance this whole time.
Yeah, I understand, but there was nobody at the Board of Education who was saying anything about it for 9 years.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, we have not been cited for this, or we're not coming into compliance now because somebody's forcing us to.
Yeah,
I
I
appreciate
just think
that.
it's good to try to be in code, and maybe that's where we should.
Absolutely.
And
That's
it's not even just, some of it's just getting our house in order altogether. When I first came here in 2015, most of the classes that we were doing for concurrent enrollment and kids were getting college credit and dual credit, high school credit, weren't even coded correctly in our student information system. And we were not getting the weighting from the state that we were supposed to pay for those classes. So it's more than just,
Working to make some improvements.
Yes.
So, thank you.
My colleagues who attend our monthly meetings with our curriculum network hosted by our AEA that oftentimes have our Department of Ed representatives come to speak are letting me know that last month our state, the state representatives reminded the curriculum directors throughout the state in that process that this was something important that they needed to get their house in order.
Thank you.
So while we haven't received a citation on this, it does appear maybe somebody's wanting to make sure that we're all aligning to code.
Thank you.
Which, by the way, is just a good practice. To align to code.
That's part of our job, right? So, okay. Any other items from the board?
Can I say something, just a couple of things real quick? I want to thank the students who came and spoke today. I know that is not an easy thing to do, to stand up here and look at us and we don't get to respond, but thank you for doing that and for speaking up for your experiences. And I'll also say, if you want to continue your advocacy, Des Moines is a great place. There's a big building there with people who make a lot of decisions that you've heard us talk about too, that involve money, and you should certainly continue that advocacy for public education. And I appreciate you all sitting through this very long meeting to do all of that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, I was talking with city council person Anita Rollins about mental health issues, but one of the things she mentioned was that there are scholarships available through Parks and Rec to participate in summer activities or year-round activities. So if people are looking for things for their kids to do, even if it's maybe not something that they can afford, there's some scholarships available, and you can find it on the Parks and Rec website. Those are my items.
Thank you, Kelly.
I have a brief report. During the week of May 2nd, I was privileged to represent the school board at a couple of events. The first was a morning band concert at Kate Mitchell School. The student instrumentalists were absolutely incredible. I was impressed, especially since nearly all of them had never played their instrument prior to the school year. Cheryl Tode and Tasha Halber, the band directors for our elementary school, should be commended for their amazing work and dedication as they travel from school to school each week doing their jobs and carrying out their ministry of music. Thanks to both of them. The second event that week was a SACRE meeting. That's students advocating for civil rights education at Ames High on that Friday. The students, mostly freshmen and sophomores, thoughtfully and articulately addressed the issues surrounding the possible Supreme Court reversal of the landmark 1973 Roe versus Wade freedom of choice legislation. The discussion was honest and respectful. My spouse Anita and I were impressed by the maturity demonstrated by the students and the passion with which they spoke, as well as the grasp of the issues that they demonstrated. They are attempting to live out the Ames Community School District's commitment to equity and access for every individual through their words and actions, and it made me proud to be a member of this school board that supports their education and their leadership.
Thank you. Any other items from the board? All right, items from the superintendent.
I don't have any this evening.
Okay, excellent. All right, we'll move on to our board planning calendar. We've talked about it a few times tonight. Our next meeting and work session will be June 6th. And Dr. Lawson will be joining us for that meeting to discuss district goals. Any other items on the board calendar? Okay, I'll entertain.
I move we adjourn.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Winfrey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us for this very long meeting. Thank you all.